The publication of Hill's Golden Rule magazine brought me in contact with the thinking class of people all over the country. It gave me my big chance to be heard. The message of optimism and goodwill among men that it carried became so popular that I was invited to go on a countrywide speaking tour during the early part of 1920, during which I had the privilege of meeting and talking with some of the most progressive thinkers of this generation. Contact with these people went a very long way toward giving me the courage to keep on doing the good work that I had started. This tour was a liberal education within itself, because it brought me in exceedingly close contact with people in practically all walks of life, and gave me a chance to see that the United States of America was a pretty large country. Comes now a description of the climax of the seventh turning point of my life. During my speaking tour, I was sitting in a restaurant in Dallas, Texas, watching the hardest downpour of rain that I have ever seen. The water was pouring down over the plate glass window in two great streams, and playing backward and forward from one of these streams to the other were little streams, making what resembled a great ladder of water. As I looked at this unusual scene, the thought flashed into my mind that I would have a splendid lecture if I organized all that I had learned from the 7 turning points of my life and all that I had learned from studying the lives of successful men, and offered it under the title of The Magic Ladder to Success. On the back of the envelope I outlined the 15 points out of which this lecture was built, and later I worked these points into a lecture that was literally built from the temporary defeats described in the 7 turning points of my life. All that I lay claim to knowing that is of value is represented by these 15 points, and the material out of which this knowledge was gathered is nothing more or less than the knowledge that was forced upon me through experiences which have undoubtedly been classed by some as failures. The reading course of which this lesson is a part is but the sum total of that which I gathered through these failures. If this course proves to be of value to you, as I hope it will, you may give the credit to those failures described in this lesson. Perhaps you will wish to know what material monetary benefits I have gained from these turning points, for you probably realize that we are living in an age in which life is an irksome struggle for existence, and none too pleasant for those who are cursed with poverty. All right, I'll be frank with you. To begin with, the estimated income from the sale of this course is all that I need, and this despite the fact that I've insisted that my publishers apply the Ford philosophy and sell the course at a popular price that is within the reach of all who want it. In addition to the income from the sale of the course, which please bear in mind is but the sale of knowledge I have gathered through failure, I am now engaged in writing a series of illustrated editorials that is to be syndicated and published in the newspapers of the country. These editorials are based upon these same 15 points as outlined in this course. The estimated net income from the sale of the editorials is more than enough to care for my needs. In addition to this, I am now engaged in collaboration with a group of scientists, psychologists, and businessmen in writing a postgraduate course which will soon be available to all students who have mastered this more elementary course, covering not only the 15 points here outlined from a more advanced viewpoint, but including still other laws which have but recently been discovered. I have mentioned these facts only because I know what a common thing it is for all of us to measure success in terms of dollars, and to refuse as unsound all philosophy that does not foot up a good bank balance. Practically all the past years of my life I have been poor, exceedingly poor as far as bank balances were concerned. This condition has been very largely a matter of choice with me, because I have been putting off the best of my time into the toilsome job of throwing off some of my ignorance and gathering in some of the knowledge of life of which I felt myself in need. From the experiences described in these 7 turning points of my life, I have gathered a few golden threads of knowledge that I could have gained in no other way than through defeat. My own experiences have led me to believe that the dumb language of defeat is the plainest and most effective language in the world, once one begins to understand it. I am almost tempted to say that I believe it to be the universal language in which nature cries out to us when we will listen to no other language. I am glad that I have experienced much defeat. It has had the effect of tempering me with the courage to undertake tasks that I would never have begun had I been surrounded by protecting influences. Defeat is a destructive force only when it is accepted as failure. When accepted as teaching some needed lesson, it is always a blessing. I used to hate my enemies. That was before I learned how well they were serving me by keeping me everlastingly on the alert lest some weak spot in my character provide an opening through which they might damage me. In view of what I've learned of the value of enemies, if I had none, I would feel it my duty to create a few. They would discover my defects and point them out to me, whereas my friends, if they saw my weaknesses at all, would say nothing about them. Of all Joaquin Miller's poems, none expressed a nobler thought than did this one. All honor to him who shall win a prize, the world has cried for 1,000 years. But to him who tries, and who fails and dies, I give great honor and glory and tears. Give glory and honor and pitiful tears to all who fail in their deeds sublime. Their ghosts are many in the van of years. They were born with time in advance of time. Oh, great is the hero who wins a name, but greater many and many a time some pale-faced fellow who dies in shame, and lets God finish the thought sublime. And great is the man with the sword undrawn, and good is the man who refrains from wine. But the man who fails and yet still fights on, in he is the twin brother of mine. There can be no failure for the man who still fights on. A man has never failed until he accepts temporary defeat as failure. There is a wide difference between temporary defeat and failure, a difference I have tried to emphasize throughout this lesson. In her poem entitled When Nature Wants a Man, Angela Morgan expressed a great truth in support of the theory set out in this lesson, that adversity and defeat are generally blessings in disguise. When nature wants to drill a man and thrill a man and skill a man, when nature wants to mold a man to play the noblest part, when she yearns with all her heart to create so great and bold a man that all the world shall praise, watch her method, watch her ways, how she ruthlessly perfects whom she royally elects, how she hammers him and hurts him, and with mighty blows converts him into trial shapes of clay which only nature understands, while his tortured heart is crying and he lifts beseeching hands. How she bends but never breaks when his good she undertakes, how she uses whom she chooses, and with every purpose fuses him, by every art induces him to try his splendor out. Nature knows what she's about. When nature wants to take a man, and shake a man, and wake a man, when nature wants to make a man to do the future's will, when she tries with all her skill, and she yearns with all her soul to create him large and whole, with what cunning she prepares him, how she goads and never spares him, how she wets him, and she frets him, and in poverty begets him, how she often disappoints whom she sacredly anoints, with what wisdom she will hide him, never minding what betide him, though his genius sob with slighting, and his pride may not forget, bids him struggle harder yet, makes him lonely, so that only God's high messages shall reach him, so that she may surely teach him what the hierarchy planned. Though he may not understand, gives him passions to command. How remorselessly she spurs him, with terrific ardor stirs him when she poignantly prefers him. When nature wants to name a man, and fame a man, and tame a man, when nature wants to shame a man to do his heavenly best, when she tries the highest test that she reckoning may bring, when she wants a god or king, how she reins him and restrains him so his body scarce contains him, while she fires him and inspires him, keeps him yearning, ever burning for a tantalizing goal, lures and lacerates his soul, sets a challenge for his spirit, draws it higher when he's near it, makes a jungle that he clear it, makes a desert that he fear it, and subdue it if he can. So doth nature make a man. Then, to test his spirit's wrath, hurls a mountain in his path, puts a bitter choice before him, and relentlessly stands o'er him. Climb or perish, so she says. Watch her purpose, watch her ways. Nature's plan is wondrous kind, could we understand her mind. Fools are they who call her blind. When his feet are torn and bleeding, yet his spirit mounts unheeding, all his higher powers speeding, blazing newer paths and fine, When the force that is divine leaps to challenge every failure, and his ardor still is sweet, and love and hope are burning in the presence of defeat, lo, the crisis, lo, the shout that must call the leader out. When the people need salvation, doth he come to lead the nation. Then doth nature show her plan when the world has found a man.